Well, it has been 5 minutes. I wasn't planning on facilitating this meeting, but there is an agenda item, so I do think we got people to talk about them. I see Stephen on the line, and I've seen Stephen in chat, and also George. So you all want to get us kicked off? Or I guess I should say that, welcome to the SIG PM meeting for September 25th, 2018. This is a recorded meeting on the internet, so don't say or do anything you wouldn't want to live forever, at least until we figure out how to scrub the internet.
Hey everyone, so this is Stephen Augustus. Wanted to talk a little bit about KEP 1A, which is the meta KEP implementation. It's essentially a KEP that seeks to improve the current state of KEPs. So KEPs have been in beta stage for a little bit, and what we're seeking to do here is one, help refine some of the existing documentation for KEPs overall to make the process easier to ingest and understand. We want to clearly define who the owners of KEPs are. One, the process itself, and two, if you write a KEP or you consume a KEP in some way, who you should be reaching out to for information, for overall responsibility of those things. Classically, we've gone through this this idea of a features process, and there has been a features lead and things like that for the release cycle. We're going to start to see that move away from features explicitly and more to this idea of enhancements, where enhancements are essentially the fuzzy union of KEPs and features, right? So a KEP being the description of some work that is to be executed across multiple release cycles, and a feature. Ideally, I think we're seeking to kind of redefine features as work that is smaller than a KEP and but rolls into a KEP and can hopefully be executed in the span of a single release cycle, right? So there's some finite state of work that can be executed, and it kind of lends itself to an overarching idea, right? So I just want to see if there are any questions about that initially before I keep blabbering. Okay, all right. So part of what we're going to do is, like I said, we're going to redefine some of the documentation around how to create KEPs. We want to make sure that it's very clear what the KEP workflow looks like. So how the different states that exist, right? So whether it's provisional or accepted or rejected or say I don't even know all the states, right? So it's it's something worthy of definition. In addition to how what the criteria is for entering and exiting each of these stages. So I'm essentially reading off of KEP 1A, which I will pop, which is on the meeting agenda, right? So there's a link for that. That PR is currently in review. The review cycle is technically over, but because of release team things and people running around, I want to make sure that I address all of the comments before officially kind of closing comments and allowing that to merge. So part of what we're going to be doing is reorganizing from the flat files that KEPs currently are into more of a directory structure. We're still going to capture the intros and the motivations and the goals and non-goals and user stories and different things like that. We just want to be able to lay it out in a way that allows for iteration, one, over the KEP itself, and two, will lend itself to be consumed by some sort of automation. So with that said, Caleb we're essentially, Caleb, Jace, and I are all working this joint effort to push KEPs into GA phase, and we're kind of trying to hash out the different things that need to happen. So one of those things we seek to do is to rename the features repo, right? So features going to I think we've landed on enhancements as the name of the repo. So K enhancements, and bringing the existing KEPs into that new repo, bringing the old design proposals, or not old design proposals, but the previous manner of drafting proposals, which is in the design proposals directory. So it's community, devel, and then design proposals is where those are currently located. And then also bringing the actual design documents. So how to, what writing a controller would look like, what the flow of certain APIs are, different things like that. Bringing that into a directory that is adjacent to the active proposals. Part of the motivation around this is one, it should have its own place. Because we're going through this whole iteration of breaking off core code. Let's do the same for proposals, right? Secondarily, for people who are trying to track KEPs and design proposals and design documents, it's very difficult to do that if you decide to watch the community repo, right? So we want to make this this more consumable to users and passerbys and actual people who are drafting these documents. And being able to find some way to, I think we're still kicking around ideas around this, but the current KEP numbering process is broken. If you submit a KEP and you have an open PR, there's kind of a race that you have to consider as you're iterating over your KEP and bumping that KEP number. So we're trying to attack multiple planes at the same time. That proposal is definitely open for comments. So if you've written a KEP before, if you've read a KEP, if you feel certain ways about it, we want to capture as much feedback as we can early in the process, so that we can make sure we're considering that as we kind of iterate over these different steps. With that said, a lot of the things that we need to make this work are going to be based around automation, right? If we can automate it, it's a lot less painful to deal with. It's consistent, and it's trusted, right? So Caleb has been working in an automation effort, and I will lend the mic to him to speak to that.
Well, there's not too much to speak to at the moment. It's just been slow. Doing another, I just basically switched my job here at Google. So I'm draining the queue of previous things and spinning up the other queue. I'm trying to, with the automation, support the iterative nature of KEPs, or really try and reinforce the iterative intention behind the KEP process. So I'm hoping to have a CLI that's workflow based, and I'm hoping to have the demo for the first the conversion logic from the current KEP format, and also tooling to create a new KEP in the new format. I'm hoping to have that demoable in a couple weeks.
Awesome. So if there's anything that I could say to people who are on the recording or who are going to be looking at the recording later or on the call right now, feedback. We need feedback on this. We want feedback on this. We want to make sure that it's an inclusive process for everyone in the community. And the idea is that the stuff should be consumable to everyone, right? So if it's not right now, please give us feedback. Secondarily, if you're submitting a KEP or reviewing a KEP, try to merge early, right? A lot of the feedback that we get right now is that KEPs hang around for a while. It's difficult-ish to merge a KEP. The scope of the people that have to touch it gathering these people at the right time, making sure they have bandwidth to actually give appropriate feedback at the right stages. So merge early, right? There is an idea of a draft or provisional KEP, right? So get the motivation, nail down the motivation, make sure that there's buy-in from your SIGs, and start to push it forward from there, right? Get that idea merged in early and then iterate over it. So this is kind of what I'm trying to do on the KEP 1A side. Just get an initial feedback loop going, incorporate that feedback, and start to attack some of this. So please, again, if you have feedback, we want to hear it. And if you are looking for feedback on your own KEPs, we want to hear that too. Like what you feel about the current process. I think that I was banging around the idea of sending out a survey of what people, kind of challenging the current assumptions of what the process is as it exists today. So whether, do you understand what feature is or an enhancement? Have you ever heard of KEPs? Have you submitted KEPs and found difficulties, right? And going through some of those user stories. So that will probably happen soonish now that I think we've all been busy with the 112 release, and now that that's starting to wrap up, we'll have more bandwidth to really attack this. So. Cool. I see George on the line. Yeah. Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, I didn't know if you were done talking or not. I was like, is he opening it up for questions or not? Hi, I'm George. Nice to meet everyone I haven't met yet. So I totally missed I saw 1A scroll by in my GitHub notifications. But then when y'all started talking about a contributor site and all that stuff, Joe kind of reminded me to go check it out. So a long time ago when Joe was first doing KEPs and stuff, he was like, we should totally have like a contributor site that shows KEPs and sorts them, sort of like how Python has their PEPs thing, how it'll show you, by number or by topic. I guess you do by SIGs or whatever. So I've been working on that, and that kind of morphed into contributor.kubernetes.io. But the main idea of doing the site in the first place was doing KEPs, doing this for KEPs. So I kind of am available to do whatever it is you all want as far as like a nice front end to it. Like I'm thinking, so are we thinking like keps.kubernetes.io would go to this, or would it be enhancement? I'm not sure on the.
So I think what's stated right now is enhancements.kates.io.
Okay.
That could change. It could be contributors.kates.io/keps, or I mean whatever. I think the vanity URL will follow, depending on what we decide to spin up. But I think one of the first steps is solidifying some of the documentation, making sure that it's presentable in GitHub. In GitHub ease, and then moving to what the site looks like. Eric Toon provided some nice feedback on the KEP around what the overall design could be or should be. Lots of hearkening to the PEP process on the Python side and how they design their layout. I think having an index page is a good idea.
Yep.
I still feel that KEPs should be. I mean, one of the things that will allow us to automate this is and also have like a sane way of delegating who merges what is continuing to have per SIG directories. What we'd also like to introduce is a Kubernetes wide directory. So for KEPs that have far-reaching implications that would go into Kubernetes wide. So this would be process, process wise. So things like the KEP itself and like KEP 1A, those are the kind of things that would go in there, as well as the large scale API changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's been some part of the holdup for merging and reviewing certain KEPs is that I think there's a lack of understanding around the concept of scoping for KEPs, right? So understanding that a KEP is SIG scoped and or Kubernetes wide, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is within the KEP template it says who's the owning SIG and who's the participating SIG, so you can put down a list of participating SIGs, and there's a special value in the metadata for Kubernetes wide, right? So Kubernetes wide should be reviewed by SIG architecture, but I think that we're in this weird space where SIG architecture are technically the owners of KEPs, although SIG PM is the owner of process for the Kubernetes project. So I think that it's incorrect to say that SIG architecture is the sole owner. I think that it's more correct to say that SIG PM is the sole owner, where SIG architecture is the masters of understanding the fidelity of the code, right? So if a KEP is far-reaching, then
Mm-hmm.
it should warrant SIG architecture oversight. So finding a way to say that eloquently will be part of rewriting the documentation. And I think that I do think that the user survey is a good idea to get to get more ideas about what the shape of this should be, both on a contributor side as well as the design for GitHub. So I think contributor side is early days. It's also interesting to know that the original motivation for the contributor side was KEPs, which I think I only found out within the last week. So a lot of this, a lot of this has been like archaeology across the project for me.
And it was one of those things where Joe was just going to bust. He's like, I'm going to bust out a Hugo site over the weekend. And then he never got around to it. And that was like a year ago. And then he's like, hey, can you finish this off for me? It's KEP 7's yours now. And I was like, what? It is? KEP 5. I'm sorry, this is KEP 5. So that's actually initially why I filed this as a KEP, because he was like, KEPs are new. Do me a favor and file through the process so like we have KEPs there for people to see. So, but I'm glad that this issue got filed, because this actually really helps us out, because we have a design from CNCF. Like Eric's feedback was really useful, because we just realized just now that we can't list every KEP on the sidebar because that won't scale.
It's madness, yeah.
Right, but we can do KEPs, design proposals, and what was the third one? I forget. So I think we could do that, and then we could generate like a nice index page with like filters. You could search by which ones are open, which ones are closed, that sort of stuff. But I did want to mention a few things, and I don't know how much you want me to capture this on the pull request. I didn't want to like last minute just start adding a bunch of stuff to your pull request, because I've been through that process and it's frustrating. She's like, hey man, just let me check it in. But Hugo, for what we use to render this stuff, does get kind of picky about tree structure. So I just wanted to let you know, like, for example, if you have someone that's going to do a KEP and they have images, like it kind of expects images to be either in a root, or you have to like define a static directory at the root of the whole repo to do a bunch of stuff. So I just wanted to let you know that exists. And also, initially, the contributor site also listed the design proposals and everything in the contributor directory. We turned that off on purpose because a lot of those old design proposals and stuff that's in the contrib directory doesn't have any front matter or any metadata. So it just gets splattered on the internet. And then we did like a broken link check on them. A lot of those links are all old. And we decided, well, if everything's going to be KEPs, we'll just leave that in the repo. And then if someone really wants to do archaeology, they can. So one thing I wanted to mention was, if we do want to list things like the design proposals and stuff like that, we probably are going to have to go back and either programmatically or figure out a way to add the front matter to each of those markdown files, which is like dash title blah.
I've been pretty explicit that I have no intention of trying to migrate the design proposals.
Okay.
So success to me looks like uh, all of the SIGs adding blockades for their SIG directory inside of the design proposals, having fully moved over to CAPS. I
Right.
don't imagine we'll get there in 1 or 2 quarters, but that's the ultimate goal there. I
Yeah.
have spent some time looking at how the Hugo page structure, and so the directory structure is actually an attempt to support the page, how Hugo works with page
Okay. Good. Good.
content. So each SIG or each KEP can have its own information there, can store its own assets and their own directories.
Good. Good.
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
I have given that some thought.
Thank you did a good job, because for us it was like generate a Hugo site, but we don't want to change the layout of the community directory because like it's been that way for a long time. So if you're starting from scratch,
Yeah,
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 So,
good job.
yeah, so to Caleb's point, I definitely see that like this is evolution of the KEP process, and it's not a full attempt to, like you were saying, you know, move over design proposals and get everything perfect in uh, essentially archive documentation.
Right.
I think that it would be enough to say, like, if you want to check out design proposals, they're over here. By now.
Yeah.
Um, so part of it, yeah. So part of it, I think I lay out in the KEP as well some of the steps that we need to do to make this happen, and I we might have to be a bit more explicit about the blockades, but I do have PRs open for the blockades already. Um,
Okay.
it's just they can't hit anytime soon until we do like some of the documentation updates and the directory restructure and stuff like that. That would happen in Kubernetes community first, and then we have to figure out a nice way of I guess assigning SIGs. Okay, well, we're going to blockade this stuff. Figure out how to figure out what you want to migrate or how this needs to be reabsorbed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess I would expect or hope the SIG leads to file their own blockade PRs in conversation. So, like, it's important. I don't want to try and force compliance here. Like, I want this to be a value-driven opt-in. So, like, I still have some bad taste in my mouth for how things went with Helm. I feel like we were too aggressive into trying to move them into our collective processes without there wasn't enough carrot there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to repeat that same process here.
Yeah. So I think I might be able to help there. So part of the other reason we wanted to make like a pretty design with like a nice URL structure and stuff was, so when I first generated the site, a lot of the SIG areas were kind of broken, right? Like some links might be broken or tables didn't render right or whatever. And I think what I'm hoping the stick will be is, as Google indexes the site, and when you type SIG cluster lifecycle or whatever, it takes you there first. People will realize that that's their public facing site of their SIG, and then will be just incentivized to make it look right. Whereas the designs, like if you go to CAPS and you sort by SIGs and you go to SIG cluster lifecycle or whatever, and they're all sorted and nice and pretty, you're like, oh, neat. But if I go to another SIG and it takes you to the old GitHub repo of a bunch of markdown files, where all the timestamps say last touched 3 years ago, I'm not going to want to participate there. So what I'm hoping to say is like, hey, this is kind of like your public place where you can plant your flag and you can print the T-shirt, and that URL will never change. And that's kind of, your SIG's homepage on the internet, I guess, is how I'm kind of pitching it. And then on the backside saying, this isn't any extra work for you. All you have to do is make sure that your front matter and your metadata is correct in your community repo, which you're kind of supposed to be doing anyway. Yeah, I can't make you, but you should. So I don't know. That's kind of how I'm approaching it from a,
Yeah.
convincing SIG stand. I've had like 900 proposals where it's like I have to convince all the SIGs to go tweak this one thing, and you'll never get 100% coverage. So like,
Yeah.
I'm already myself.
Yep. I also intend to use some of the organizational carrots by reducing the documentation process workload for folks working at large corporations, where the KEP process, the design proposal process, the feature process, and their internal tracking process all ends up being, multiplicative.
Yeah.
And being able to generate some of this stuff from the others, I think, will also help. But that's a further down the road. It's like, quarter two, quarter three.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Bob couldn't be here, but consider me and Mr. Bobby Tables. He's on Slack. We'll just build this for you. I just told Steven and Stack earlier, just assign us stuff. The source code lives in the Kubernetes SIG org/contributor site. So, and CF, we already have a ticket filed as far as, hey, if we run into a Hugo problem, can you help us, find a person to implement stuff? So it might be a case of just us filing feature requests and then having someone implement. Like in my head, I totally want like a table of caps that you can sort, and you could, like, it'd be really cool if you could see, well, what caps am I assigned to or involved in, and like filter and all kind of Web 2.0 stuff. I'm assuming.
That I would love to get us aligning with some of the work that Paris has been working on with Outreachy and our Google Summer of Code. Like, we have people, like, I don't know if we need to necessarily wait for round trip with the CNCF, since we've got these funds already allocated for these projects. Okay. I think we could work to help scope some of this stuff with our existing mentorship initiatives.
Okay, I have a call with her tomorrow, so I will check.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely chew her ear off there.
So, George, something really important that you mentioned is that currently we have our community meetings, and we kind of do we do SIG updates, and we do demos and release team updates, and occasionally the graph of the week and the shout outs, and then occasionally the KEP of the week, right?
Yeah.
And you made a very important point that we need to make sure that KEPs are, one, understood as an accepted process, and two, by way of that, making sure they get integrated into the current process, right? So making, if there is a KEP features, part of the community meeting outside of just like KEP of the week, are like, hey, here's someone who designed a really good KEP, and or here's even if it's a 5-minute workshop of, this is a common problem that we see when, when addressing KEPs.
Yeah.
So I totally agree that should be integrated into the community meeting. We just need to figure out what the contributor
for sure. The KEP of the week, I think, was my naming, but we can definitely just block off a section of the meeting that is all KEPs. Like the whole, like this, the community meeting started way before I joined, but it was my understanding the original intent of the community meeting is stuff's getting siloed. This is the place where SIGs, if you're making a change that affects a lot of people, it should be part of the community meeting. And it feels to me, without like trying to tell people what to do, where it's like, if your KEP is touching things, like presenting to the community as part of the community meeting should kind of be like a thing that you just do. Like it would be, you go into a local government thing where someone's going to pave a road in front of you and you need community buy-in before you actually do it or whatever, right? But I was hesitant of being like, should we say, if you're going to propose a KEP, you have to present at the community meeting, because that sounds a little, on the other side. But like, I feel like if we could, especially people who already organize and kind of know what they're doing and have had a good KEP experience, like, go first kind of thing, that it's like, oh, okay, this is just how people do things. And then they would just start to do it. Like I feel like if someone's writing a KEP, they would want to be like, okay, I've got my thing written down. Next step, I'm going to present it. Like, it feels like they would want to do it. And, my KEP needs more feedback. Time to go to the community meeting. It feels like a natural step for them to part of the process.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think what we need to identify is a set of KEP leaders or people who have been doing this well and been doing it for a little while, who've essentially dog fooded the process. Kind of the motivation around making sure there was a KEP around improving KEPs was so that SIG PM was also dog fooding their own process, right? So we want to make sure that it's good, it's visible, and it's available for providing feedback. And also kind of being able to poke holes in the existing process. So it's hopefully a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's release retrospective this week, but next week, if you want to do 1A as a presentation for it, feel free to let me know.
So we're not gonna do. So
I tried to trap you. You're like,
you're like, whoa!
You almost got me.
So I'm planning on doing the SIG Azure one, and then I think between like having the SIG updates and the release retrospective, that'll be enough. Cool. Ehor suggested that we do. So what we're gonna do is get this to merge first.
Sure.
I'm basically going to incorporate all of the feedback and say, hey, look, thank you again for all the feedback. This was a great list of things to go through. Here are some of the action items. Here's what we can action on right now. Here are things that we need to we have a concrete idea of what we're doing and we're going to move forward on. And here are things that we still need to kind of workshop. So those things, we haven't forgot about them. They are here clearly on the PR. With that said, let's get this merged and call it a day. We can iterate over it later. So once that happens, and once I think once we kick it around a little bit more on SIG PM, we'll be ready to do a community presentation. That'll likely be in October.
Okay.
So I'll work with you to figure out what the date would be for that.
And then when you mentioned that you were going to tell SIGs, hey, we're about to move. Are you going to create the empty one first? And then copy things over? Are you going to copy KEPs over?
So part of the constraint for, and this was kind of laid out by Brian and some of the people in SIG architecture, that we need to preserve the Git history. We need to attempt to preserve PRs and attempt to preserve issues as well for KEPs, right? So part of that will be introducing a new kind KEP label. So that we can track the existing KEPs, the KEP issues and PRs that are open, and then I think a singular announcement won't be enough. We'll have to take it to the individual KEP owners and make sure that they're aware of what's happening. The reorganization of the directory will happen before we do the migration. So we essentially want to make sure that we close the loop on open PRs and kind of say hey, merge early. Let's just get this done and capture the feedback that you need to capture for this, and we can open a new one once we move it over. So hopefully we can get the PRs that are listed under kind KEP. So kind KEP, the work is done to create the label already. The PR is up. I think I just need to rebase it. Once that happens, we'll create the label and I'll start tagging things as kind KEP, reaching out to people individually. And once we close the loop on the open PRs, we'll try to say hey, we're actually pushing forward with this. If you're don't create a new KEP past if you create a new KEP past blah, it should be created over here, right?
Gotcha.
We won't be, the directory restructure will definitely happen within Kubernetes community first. But we want to make sure that we close the loop on open KEPs before we do the migration over to K enhancements.
Okay, so for the site, we'll just keep going where we're going, and then
for the site,
we can fix a bunch of stuff no matter what you're doing. So
exactly.
Sweet. All right, we will do so then. All right, thanks for clearing everything up. I appreciate that.
Totally.
I'm looking forward to this. This is gonna be great.
It's actually good to say it out loud instead of in my head. All of it has been Slack chats and emails and writing. So it's good to say this out loud and have it recorded for posterity before we move forward. Yeah,
because Bob and I have been kind of not sure what to do. We're well, wouldn't it be great if we could get this stuff, but then we didn't want to make too many changes in the community repo because it's already established, but we did want people to have like good URLs for stuff instead of sending, because I always mess up git.k8s.io, like I forget a slash or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I just discovered that the redirect repo existed in the first place like a few days ago. So it's like there's always a new part of Kubernetes Explore. But I do think one of the biggest barriers to adoption will be making sure that we have a good presentation layer around this. So figuring out how to do that and making sure that we actually incorporate everyone's feedback in that is huge.
Yep, and the work's already been done as far as linking into Kubernetes.io, the parent site, which is getting a new community page, and it will link directly to this and all that stuff. So we don't have to worry about that. It'll just be on the internet October-ish.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah, they're relaunching all that. Yeah, I was like, oh no, please don't create a new one. I did all this work. Yeah, like we've got the analytics are plugged into it. Like I'll be able to tell you which keps get the most traffic. Like it's all set to go.
That's going to be awesome.
Yeah. I just needed guidance on the side, but you just tell Eric if you see him before I do, just keep him coming, because we were like, well, how are we going to start the site? And then I was like, in 2 years, that sidebar will be useless, or even, so why don't we think about it? So this forced us to kind of look back at it and think about the index page and stuff.
Yeah, that feedback is huge. What I see as a KEP index page is something along the lines of being able to, honestly, I would love to be able to filter and just be able to say like, oh, I'm looking for KEPs from SIG apps or SIG autoscaling, right? And see that at a glance, right? Yeah. So maybe not even a sidebar, right? Maybe just a big blob of a page, right, that has filtering functionality.
Yeah. I can't quite explain it in words, but like I think we've all seen enough cool Web 2.0 stuff where it's like we want like a Netflix of KEPs, I guess. Like, it's like because what I do searches, and it's always, because it defaults to numbers, all the first page of results are KEPs that are already either closed or, like by default, I want to see the newer ones usually. What I mean?
Right.
It's like, KEP 1 still, I'm not. Yeah, that was like 3 months ago. I need this one. So
I mean, part of the metadata will be like last updated, right? So if people are keeping last updated up to date, we can filter on that too. We can sort on that.
Yeah.
Man, you're giving me so many ideas.
I know. So. Yeah, so I'm cool. So Bob and I are working on this. If any of you know any Hugo experts, though, we could always use help, because we're just learning this stuff and kind of bootstrapping along.
Cool.
Seems like something to scope out in general. Maybe as part of SIG Docs with a program like Outreachy, and so we start training a cohort of people who are both associated with the project, and have a particular skill set that the project needs. It seems well scoped enough for us to make progress on it.
Yeah. And we've got issues for them, so like, it's not going to be like, hey, go do Hugo stuff. Like, it's actually specific like issues that you can assign someone, as opposed to like, it would be easier, I think, for them if we just file really specific issues, as opposed to go figure out this site, right?
Yeah, well scoped is the name of the game.
Like, okay.
For it to happen and for that contributor board to work, we need to have like well-defined projects for people to work on. And I do think that Outreachy and Summer of Code are good outlets for that. Given that we have 15 more minutes, and we've been yapping around, I want to make sure that everyone on the call has an opportunity to contribute some feedback. So I'll shut up.
Yeah, I'll shut up too. Thanks.
Just a sense from me, that's Ihor speaking. As a person who has been involved into the early days of the features process, I'm really impressed on this moving forward. So we faced numerous issues with the existing features process, and simply enhancing the existing process couldn't be the good solution to solving everything. So I'm really impressed about everything happening around the new major enhancement around the features, KEPs enhancements, and so on. So thank you so much to Caleb, Jace, and Stephen for doing all this stuff. I'd like to see us moving forward with all these items as soon as possible.
Yeah. I think a part of the reason that I got excited about this was actually working on the shadowing Ehor for 111 and taking over features for 112. Like there's such a sentiment in the community that, like, yes, it's nice to be able to view a features tracking sheet, but overall, like, there are some big pains, and I'm community giddy. I like that we're all gathering together to figure out how to fix this. So. All right. Well, anybody else have things they want to discuss? Ehor, actually, the survey. What's the current plan or status there?
All right. Yes. So I received the final sign off from you last week. So I've been temporarily offline yesterday and today, so I haven't been able to push it live. So I'd like to push it live. We are also going to have the SIG PM presentation next week at the CNCF end user community meeting. And I'd like us to discuss there the new CAP process and encourage the CNCF end users to also fill the survey. And we definitely will have enough content to discuss in Shanghai and Seattle during the SIG PM gathering meetings. Will that work for everyone? Any objections here?
I think that sounds great.
Perfect.
All right. So since everyone has been quiet, I think that it's worthwhile to give everyone that 12 minutes back, unless anyone has any objections to that.
One final item for me before we'll close the meeting. I had a proposal of having the weekly meetings instead of bi-weekly meetings. Steven upvoted this, but I'd like to have at least one more +1 from the SIG to move forward with this initiative, or -1 if someone has any objections.
I mean, I would personally -1. I'm already at full meeting capacity as it is. I find it that I just can't make progress and report back in a week on the array of things I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
So one concern I have is that we don't do these meetings frequently enough, and I think that we do have. I think that we do have like items on the plate to pick up. So it's I'm still +1. I hold Caleb's sentiment of too many meetings. We all have like way too many meetings. So I think in addition to having it weekly, Ehor was also suggesting shortening it to 30 minutes. I'm trying to think of what SIG it was. API Machinery. API Machinery has a calendar invite that is like the day before their meeting that basically says like, this is the last call for agenda items. And I think what we can do is maybe adopt that and say, if there are no agenda items by X time, then we don't have the meeting.
Another option can be that SIG architecture is doing, so they have bi-weekly meetings for the regular meetings, and also bi-weekly office hours happen in the same hours as the regular meetings. So 1 week is for the regular meeting, and another one is for the office hours and like more informal discussions.
Right. So I mean, we need to overall there need to be more people in the room for us to even decide how to delineate the two meetings. So I guess George, you're on here too. So if you want to think up ways of helping us to drive drive adoption to the meetings, that would be cool too. Because I'd like to see more people in the room just chatting about this stuff, and hopefully that will dictate what we decide to do with the meetings. Okay.
Any other suggestions from the audience? Any other thoughts? All right, we can discuss it later, right? It's not really urgent, but I'd like to see some movement in this area as well in the foreseeable future.
All right. Let's maybe put up a reminder for that email thread.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for hanging out with us for the hour. Take it easy.
Bye, everyone.